Everybody, it's MLive's Nick Baumgardner here, back with another edition of Ask Nick, our weekly Michigan football mailbag video feature here on MLive. Excuse me. So yeah, a lot of questions this week, obviously, as expected. Many of them angry questions from emailers, commenters, Twitter folks, everywhere else. And you know, I got a wide array of them, but I guess the basic theme all week long was you know, asking me why. That was basically why. You know, why after 3+ seasons does Michigan under Brady Hoke still look like a team that just is in no way ready to beat quality opponents on the road, and really doesn't look anywhere near close to being a team that can contend for a Big Ten championship? Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Why, right? I wrote on Sunday that I thought that football team, after that 31-0 loss, I thought Brady Hoke's team looked farther away from serious contention than it probably ever has since he's been here. At any point, I think that it's just been a slow downturn, as everyone's been able to see from the minute it started until now. And obviously that loss was the worst he's had here at Michigan, point wise, and I think it's probably the worst in general. I think that people point to that Alabama game and say, well, that was a thorough beating. This was probably worse because this was a team you should have been able to compete with. There was no excuse for that at all. I don't care if you're on the road or what. I don't care if guys got hurt. That's fine. Notre Dame played with awesome players too, and I frankly don't think Notre Dame is anywhere near what Alabama was that season. So that being said, why are they still struggling with the same issues? And to me, it always goes back to the little stuff, the fundamentals, and the little things in fundamentals, and just playing solid, sound football has been something that's escaped this team under Brady Hoke basically from day one. And to me, it all goes back to him and his coaching staff. They are the ones who have to be on Front Street here, because at this point you have the roster you want. I know it's a young roster, that's fine. A lot of places play with young rosters, but you have your guys, you recruited your personnel, you got rid of an offensive coordinator and you made him the scapegoat, and you bring in a new one, and it's still the same situation. You want to play with your identity as a tough, physical football team that is stingy on defense and doesn't make mistakes. Well, you're not a tough physical football team, especially on offense. You're really not that stingy on defense, and you make too many mistakes there, and you make mistakes. I mean, it's fundamental stuff. It's and it's across the board, and it's not one guy, it's not one player. A lot of people want to point at Devin Gardner, and that's fine. I mean, Devin Gardner is the quarterback, and he's the most visible guy in the field. Obviously, he's not without blame here. I mean, he's making some of the same errors and same mistakes that he made last season, and some of the ones he made even in his short stint year prior, subbing in for Denard Robinson. But he's not the only one here, folks. I mean, the offensive line is still, I think they're they looked a little bit better, but they're still struggling to pick up blitz concepts. They're still really struggling to push, get any kind of consistent push. You want to be a tough team that runs the ball downhill, and you have an offensive line like that from week to week just doesn't seem to be making any kind of big leaps. Maybe they will in the coming weeks, but we haven't seen it yet. And then you flip to the other side of the football. Michigan's, solid against the run. They stop the run, but at the same time, the back four has no idea what it's doing, because at the line they're trying to play this press coverage at the line of scrimmage, and you got guys with their footworks all wrong. They're letting inside, releases go to wide receivers at the line of scrimmage. They're just not doing the small, fundamental, basic ideas and basic things that make good teams good teams. Good football teams that have the identity or play the way Michigan plays. And there's not a lot of teams, if we're being honest, left in college football that subscribe completely to this theory of we want to possess the ball on offense, beat you up with our defense, and, kind of grind the game out. There's not a lot of teams that do that anymore. That's fine. You can win that way. Michigan State wins that way, or had won that way last year. Stanford wins that way. Some other places do as well. So it's not impossible, but if you're going to do that, you have to be tough, and you have to be perfect at the little stuff. The little things, reading a blitz at the line of scrimmage, getting out of the huddle in time. Devin struggled with that last week. Too many times again, he's getting to the line of scrimmage. There's 3 seconds, 4 seconds on the play clock. He's just got to snap the ball. He doesn't have time to read the defense. He doesn't have time to look at anything, because they're just languishing, and they're not doing the small stuff that you don't see, the hidden everything that goes into winning a football game. And why is that continuing to happen? Why is that? Is that a player thing? No, it's not a player thing. These guys, and it's not an effort thing, because I really think these guys played hard against Notre Dame. I really, truly believe that. And in some ways, that actually makes it worse, because I don't think you could blame it on, well, guys just quit or rolled over and died, and I don't think that was the case. I think they continued to try They just didn't quite know what was happening because their fundamentals were off. They weren't doing the little things, play to play, minute to minute, that helps you win a football game. And all that to me goes back to coaching, and it goes back to just ingraining into your team about if you want to play a certain way, certain things have to be important, and those basic fundamentals have to be what you completely hang your hat on. You have to make blocks. You can't miss blocks. You can't miss reads as a quarterback. You can't miss holes as a running back. There's a perfect example in that Notre Dame game. Derek Green it's an inside zone play. It's blocked decently well. He's headed to the right side. There's a massive cutback lane to the left. He runs right into the back of an offensive lineman. It's just, you're not doing these small things that have to happen for you to take off. And until that changes, they're going to struggle. And they're going to beat teams that they're better than because they have better talent. I mean, they're going to beat some of these lower level teams because they're better players. They have better players. And that's how they've won a lot of their games, because they've just been better, they've had better talent. It's not because they've out-schemed somebody or out-thought somebody or out-coached anyone, and that's ultimately always coming back to Brady Hoke, and it's more than just your week-to-week, day-to-day preparation, more than just making sure that guys have fundamentals, down pat in practice or whatever when you're preparing for a game. It's your decisions and your calls during a game that affect the outcome of it. In a game like Notre Dame, for instance, the first couple series, Michigan goes down, does some things on offense, and they come up empty on a couple field goals, another problem, but they come up empty on a couple field goals, empty drives. Well, the next few times down, Notre Dame adjusts to whatever Michigan's doing, and Michigan can't do anything. So Notre Dame adjusts, you didn't, and you're struggling. Same thing defensively. First defensive series, Michigan does a nice job. Notre Dame adjusts immediately, takes all the quick stuff. Ball's coming out fast, 3-step drop, 1, 2, 3, go. Your corners can't cover. They figure that out, and they exploit you all day long, and you don't do anything to adjust. Now, is that a scheme thing? I think maybe it is, because Greg Madison even admitted they went away from, just being strictly in man in the first half. They shuffled it up a little bit in the second half, and, Notre Dame wasn't as successful in the second half. So it's just little stuff. It's not any overarching, there's one huge giant problem, and for anyone to try and paint that it ever was that is just kind of missing the point. Was El Borges' offense rough, and did it make sense? No, it didn't. But it was always more than that. It was always just, this has been a team that has struggled to be fundamentally consistent, play in and play out, day to day, game to game, since he became head coach. In 2011, that team had an edge to it. That team played tough, right? That's what they want. They want a team that plays tough, and a team that plays with a physical edge and a kind of a nastiness a little bit to it. That team did that, and they were able to sort of overcome some of that stuff because they did play with that kind of attitude. They haven't had that for whatever reason. Again, I think that goes back to your coaching staff. You're not hammering that home well enough. Yeah, you have a young roster, but fundamentals. And I'm not a football coach. I don't pretend to know all the little things that go on, but I know a team that makes little stupid mistakes every week when I see it, and that's what you see when you see Michigan play. It's the same little stuff, and that's the biggest concern, the biggest problem, and the reason why it all goes back to Brady Hoke and his staff, because your guys aren't getting better day to day, week to week at the things that they're struggling with. It's repeated mistakes at a pretty high volume, and it's costing you football games still. You're 3-7. In your last 10 games, those 3 wins are against Indiana, Northwestern, and Appalachian State. In Indiana, you came really close to blowing that one. Northwestern, you needed a fire drill field goal to steal that, and Appalachian State was terrible. So that's all you got to show for yourselves in the last 10 games, because frankly, you just haven't been a very tough football team, and you haven't been very fundamentally sound. That's it. Until that changes, they're going to struggle against quality opponents, especially on the road, because good teams do the little things, and good teams do those on the road, and they win football games, and they make adjustments in games, and they roll with the punches, and they're able to kind of rebound as the game's going on, and they're not just letting it all go away and just sticking to with whatever they thought might work before the week started, and then there it is. So, long rambling answer, but at the end of the day, why is this team still struggling? It's struggling because the staff just isn't doing a good enough job. I mean, that's frankly, I think that's obvious. It's stating the obvious at this point. But there was a lot of excuses and things that were built in, and some of those were valid that you could point to and say, well, Denard Robinson gets hurt in 2012, and that really hurts Michigan, and that did. This is a young football team. They lost a lot of attrition from that 2010 recruiting class. It's going to hurt the program, and it did. A lot of other things hurt this team that you can't really control. But what you can control isn't being perfected, and that's ultimately the biggest issue. this team has struggled with those fundamentals. They've struggled with the little things, from day one almost. And they were able to get away with it in 2011 because they were a team that played tough. They hung in there. Mentally, they were older, those types of things. And maybe that comes in time, but you have to be better with your fundamentals, your technique, and the little stuff, play to play. It just isn't there right now. Maybe that's what's going to turn this around. That has to be the first thing they pick up and say, everybody's going to have to start, piece by piece, brick by brick, fundamentals, and just hang on for dear life, because at that point, you're not good enough to just walk out on the field right now and just beat teams because you're more talented, because it's not going to happen. That has to be hammered home. The toughness, you want to play a certain way, you have to, kind of coach it. And that's ultimately the biggest issue, because you're preaching an identity and you're in no way living up to that identity. And that's ultimately, at the end of the day, you still have a team that doesn't have an identity, and they haven't really had one for 3 years here. So that's the biggest issue. Until that gets fixed, I don't know how this thing changes. But could it change? Sure. I mean, they could get that thing turned around. Maybe it's just a matter of repetition, and all of a sudden it clicks, and there you go. But right now, that's what it is, and that's where they're at, and that's why they're struggling, and that's why I think they'll continue to struggle on the road until those things are addressed and fixed. And, because, bad teams screw up the little stuff, good teams do it well. And it's boring, and it's cliche maybe, but it is what it is. And that's where it goes. It all lays at the feet of Brady Hoke, and it's his job to fix it, no one else's. And we'll pay attention here and see if he can get it done starting this Saturday against Miami, Ohio. Brendan and I will be back after the game to break that down, and then we'll have stuff, obviously, throughout the rest of the weekend. So thanks for everybody for watching. Check out the rest of the mailbag here for some other answers, and we'll talk to you guys again next week.